The night air in Los Angeles was unusually cold. It was just after midnight, and the streets around the small neighborhood gym were almost empty. Most of the stores had already closed. Metal shutters covered the windows of restaurants and convenience stores. A few neon signs flickered above the sidewalks, casting broken patches of red, blue, and white across the wet pavement. A police cruiser sat at the corner with its headlights off. Two officers stood beside it, talking quietly. Neither of them knew that within the next few minutes, an ordinary-looking walk home would become a confrontation none of them would ever forget. The back door of the gym opened. Bruce Lee stepped outside. He was wearing a simple white training shirt, loose dark pants, and worn shoes. His hair was slightly damp from training. He carried a small towel over one shoulder. There was nothing dramatic about his appearance. No championship belt, no crowd, no cameras, no spotlight. Just Bruce Lee walking alone into the night. He stopped near the sidewalk and looked up at the street. For a moment, everything was silent. Then he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Bruce didn't turn around immediately. The footsteps came closer. A large man stepped out from the darkness. He was broad-shouldered, muscular, and several inches taller than Bruce. His long hair was pulled back tightly, and he wore a dark gray shirt stretched across his powerful frame. It was Seagal. He had been watching the gym for nearly 20 minutes, and he hadn't come there to admire Bruce. He had come looking for a confrontation. Seagal looked Bruce up and down. Then he laughed. Not loudly. Just enough to make sure Bruce heard it. Bruce finally turned. Their eyes met. Seagal tilted his head. "You're Bruce Lee?" Bruce gave a small nod. "That's what they tell me." Seagal smiled. "I expected someone bigger." Bruce said nothing. Seagal stepped closer. "You know what's funny?" Bruce waited. "They call you a fighter." A pause. Seagal looked at Bruce's narrow frame and shook his head. "You call this a fighter?" Bruce's expression didn't change. Seagal continued. "You're smaller than half the guys who train in that building." Bruce glanced toward the gym, then back at Seagal. "I'm not interested in fighting you." That answer made Seagal laugh again. "Of course you're not." Bruce remained calm. But there was something about his silence that began to irritate Seagal. Most people argued when insulted. Bruce didn't. Most people tried to prove themselves. Bruce didn't. And that made Seagal feel as though Bruce was somehow looking through him. Seagal stepped directly into Bruce's personal space. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Bruce looked at him. "I am." For the first time, Seagal's smile disappeared. The street became quieter. One of the police officers at the corner noticed the confrontation. He nudged his partner. "Something's happening over there." The second officer looked toward Bruce and Seagal. He immediately recognized Bruce. His expression changed. "Wait. What? That's Bruce Lee." The first officer frowned. "So?" The second officer didn't answer. He had heard stories. Not Hollywood stories. Not rumors from newspapers. Stories from people who had actually trained with Bruce. Stories about speed that seemed impossible. Timing so precise that opponents didn't realize they had lost until they were already on the ground. But the officer wasn't worried about Bruce. He was worried about the other man. Seagal grabbed the front of Bruce's white shirt. Bruce looked down at the hand, then slowly looked back into Seagal's eyes. "Let go." Seagal smirked. "What are you going to do if I don't?" Bruce didn't answer. Seagal pulled harder. The fabric stretched. Bruce remained still. Then Seagal suddenly ripped the shirt open. The sound of tearing fabric cut through the quiet street. Bruce's shirt hung in pieces from his shoulders. For a moment, nobody moved. The two officers started walking toward them. "That's enough," one officer shouted. Seagal looked toward them. "You stay out of this." The officers stopped. Bruce lowered his eyes. He looked at the torn shirt. Then at Seagal. His face was calm. Almost too calm. Seagal pointed at Bruce. "Now what?" Bruce slowly removed the torn fabric from his shoulders. He folded it once, then placed it on the hood of a parked car. Seagal stared at him. "You're not angry?" Bruce answered quietly. "Anger makes people slow." That sentence changed the atmosphere. Seagal's jaw tightened. He stepped backward, then forward. He raised his hands. "Fine." Bruce didn't raise his hands. Seagal looked confused. "You don't even want to fight?" Bruce shook his head. "I don't need to." Seagal suddenly lunged. Bruce moved, not backward, sideways, so quickly that Seagal's fist cut through empty air. Seagal turned. Bruce was already behind him. The officers stared. Seagal spun around and threw another punch. Bruce slipped underneath it. Again. Nothing dramatic. No wild movements. Just precision. Seagal became frustrated. He attacked harder. Bruce kept disappearing from the line of attack. Every time Seagal thought he had Bruce cornered, Bruce was somewhere else. 3 steps away. Then 2. Then directly beside him. The fight had barely begun, but Seagal was already breathing heavily. Bruce wasn't. And that was what frightened the officers. One of them whispered, "He's not even using everything." The other officer nodded. "I know." Seagal heard them. His pride took over. He charged again. This time Bruce didn't move away. He stepped toward him. Their bodies nearly collided. Bruce redirected Seagal's arm, turned his shoulder, and used Seagal's own momentum against him. Seagal stumbled. He caught himself before falling. Bruce stepped away. He gave Seagal another chance. That only made the larger man angrier. "You think this is funny?" "No." "Then fight me." Bruce looked at him. "I am." Seagal froze. For a second, the street seemed completely silent. Then Seagal attacked again. Bruce blocked, countered, moved, stopped. The exchange lasted only seconds, but to everyone watching, it felt longer. Seagal finally landed a glancing strike against Bruce's shoulder. The sound echoed down the street. Bruce took 1 step back. The officers tensed. Seagal smiled. Finally, Bruce touched his shoulder, then looked at Seagal. There was no anger in his eyes, only concentration. "You got one." Seagal's smile widened. "I'm going to get another." Bruce shook his head. "No." "Why?" "Because now I know your timing." Seagal's expression changed. Bruce stepped forward, and this time the fight became completely different. Bruce didn't wait for Seagal to attack. He moved first. A quick hand strike forced Seagal to protect his face. Before Seagal could react, Bruce changed angle. A second movement disrupted his balance. A third forced him backward. Seagal stumbled toward the police cruiser. The officers moved aside. Bruce stopped. He didn't chase him. He simply stood there. Seagal looked around. The police officers. The empty street. The torn shirt. Then Bruce. For the first time that night, doubt appeared in his eyes. And Bruce noticed it. He quietly said, "That's enough." Seagal clenched his fists. "No." Bruce stared at him. "Walk away." Seagal shook his head. "I didn't come here to walk away." Bruce's expression became serious. "Then you're going to leave here with something you didn't have when you arrived." Seagal frowned. "What?" Bruce looked directly into his eyes. "Respect." The words hung in the air. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Seagal stepped forward one final time, and the officers instinctively backed away. Not because they were afraid of Seagal. They were afraid of what would happen if Bruce finally stopped holding back. Quick question for everyone watching. If you were standing on that street, who would you bet on, Bruce Lee or the much larger Seagal? Comment Bruce or Seagal below. And tell me where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, India, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, or somewhere else? If you're enjoying the story, hit like, subscribe, and stay until the end. Because the police officers already knew something Seagal didn't. Bruce Lee had not even begun to fight seriously. Seagal raised his hands again. Bruce slowly lowered his own. The officers exchanged nervous looks. One officer whispered, "Why is he lowering his guard?" His partner answered, "Because he doesn't need it." Seagal suddenly rushed forward. Bruce waited. At the last possible moment, Bruce shifted his weight. Seagal's fist passed inches from his face. Bruce caught the attacking arm. For a fraction of a second, everything stopped. Bruce looked into Seagal's eyes. Then he released him. Seagal stumbled forward. Bruce didn't strike. That was the moment Seagal finally understood. Bruce wasn't afraid of him. Bruce was controlling himself. And that was much more dangerous. Seagal turned slowly. Bruce stood several feet away. Calm. Silent. Almost motionless. One of the officers stepped forward. "That's enough." This time, Seagal didn't argue. He looked at Bruce. Bruce looked back. Neither man said anything. The city continued moving around them. A distant car passed through the intersection. A neon sign buzzed above the sidewalk. And somewhere far away, a siren echoed through the night. Seagal finally looked down at the torn piece of Bruce's shirt lying on the pavement. Then he looked at Bruce again. "You really think you're better than me?" Bruce shook his head. "No." Seagal frowned. Bruce continued. "I think you came here trying to prove something." He paused. "And now you don't have to." Seagal stood silently. For the first time, the giant man had no answer. Bruce picked up his towel. He turned toward the gym, then stopped. He looked back at the officers. The officers expected him to say something. Instead, Bruce simply nodded and walked away. Seagal watched him disappear through the gym doors. The officer beside him finally spoke. "You were lucky." Seagal didn't respond. The officer looked at the torn shirt on the ground. "No," he corrected himself. "You were lucky he was patient." Inside the gym, Bruce walked toward the changing room. He stopped in front of a mirror. His shoulder was slightly red from the strike. He touched it, then smiled faintly. Not because he had won, but because he had learned something. The man outside had power. Real power. But power without control was dangerous. And Bruce Lee knew better than anyone that the greatest fighter wasn't always the strongest man in the room. Sometimes, it was the man who knew exactly when not to strike. Outside, Seagal remained standing beneath the streetlight. He looked toward the police officers, then toward the gym. His pride had been wounded, but something else had been awakened. Respect. And neither he nor Bruce knew yet that this encounter would not be their last. Next morning, Bruce Lee woke before sunrise. The city was still quiet. Los Angeles had not yet filled with traffic, noise, and crowds. The streets outside his training space were almost empty, and a pale gray light was beginning to appear behind the buildings. Bruce stood alone in the gym. His torn white shirt from the previous night was lying on a wooden bench. He had kept it. Not as a trophy, not as a reminder of the man who attacked him, but as a reminder of something much more important. Control. Bruce wrapped his hands and began training. One movement, then another. Fast, precise, relaxed. There was no music playing, no audience, only the sound of his breathing and his feet moving across the floor. But Bruce's mind wasn't completely focused on training. He kept thinking about Seagal, not about the punches, not about the confrontation, about the look in the man's eyes after the fight. Seagal hadn't looked defeated. He had looked confused. That was different. Bruce knew that people who were embarrassed in public could become unpredictable. And Seagal had left without accepting what happened. That meant the story wasn't over. Bruce stopped moving. He looked toward the entrance. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then he heard footsteps outside. The door opened. A familiar face appeared. One of the police officers from the previous night. Bruce recognized him immediately. "You again?" The officer nodded. "I need to talk to you." Bruce lowered his hands. "About last night?" "Not exactly." The officer stepped inside. He looked around the empty gym. Then he lowered his voice. "That man you fought?" Bruce waited. "He has friends." Bruce's expression remained calm. "How many?" "Enough." Bruce nodded. The officer continued. "They aren't professional fighters. They're worse." Bruce looked at him. "Why?" "They don't care about rules." The officer pulled a folded photograph from his pocket. He placed it on the bench. Bruce looked at it. There were several men standing outside a warehouse. Some were fighters. Others looked like bodyguards. One man stood in the center. Bruce recognized him. Seagal. But there was something different about him. He wasn't smiling. He was looking directly into the camera. The officer said, "They're planning something." Bruce looked up. "For me?" The officer shook his head. "Maybe." A pause. "Or maybe they're planning to use you to make a statement." Bruce folded the photograph. "Where?" The officer hesitated. "An old warehouse near the river." Bruce looked toward the windows. Morning light was beginning to fill the gym. "You want me to stay away?" The officer nodded. "That's what I'd recommend." Bruce smiled faintly. "Then why did you come here?" The officer didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "Because I don't think you're the one they should be worried about." Bruce looked at him. The officer continued, "I think they have no idea what they're walking into." By noon, the story had already spread through several local gyms. Someone had seen the confrontation. Someone else had told a fighter. That fighter had told another. By the afternoon, the story had become something completely different. Some people claimed Bruce had defeated Seagal in seconds. Others claimed Seagal had knocked Bruce across the street. Some said the police had arrested everyone. Others said Bruce had fought 5 men at once. The truth became buried beneath the rumors, but one thing remained consistent. Bruce Lee had walked away, and Seagal hadn't. That evening, Bruce entered a small restaurant. He wanted food, nothing more. He sat alone at a corner table. The restaurant was almost empty. A waitress brought him tea. Bruce thanked her. Then he noticed something. The door had opened. 3 men entered. They weren't looking for a table. They were looking for him. Bruce didn't move. One man saw him. He whispered something to the others. They approached. The tallest one stopped beside Bruce's table. "Bruce Lee?" Bruce looked up. "Yes?" The man smiled. "Seagal sends his regards." Bruce put down his cup. "I don't want trouble." The man laughed. "That's funny." He looked at Bruce's hands. "You don't look like someone who wants trouble." Bruce looked at him. "Neither do you." The man's smile disappeared. He grabbed the edge of the table. Bruce immediately noticed the movement, but before anything happened, the restaurant door opened again. The police officer from earlier entered. He looked at the three men, then at Bruce. The tallest man stepped away. "You're following us now?" The officer shook his head. "I'm following him." He pointed toward Bruce. The man laughed. "Why?" The officer answered. "Because I know what you're planning." Silence. The three men looked at each other. Then they left. Bruce watched them disappear. The officer sat across from him. "You need to leave town for a few days." Bruce shook his head. "No." "Why?" Bruce looked toward the door. "Because if I leave, they'll think they won." The officer sighed. "You don't understand." Bruce looked back at him. "I understand exactly." That night, Bruce returned to the gym. He trained alone. But this time, he wasn't training for speed. He trained for patience. He stood in front of the heavy bag. Didn't strike it. He simply watched it swing. Forward, backward, forward, backward. Then suddenly, Bruce moved. His fist stopped just short of the bag. He didn't touch it. He smiled. The officer's warning had been correct. This wasn't going to be about winning a fight. It was going to be about avoiding one. But Bruce also knew something else. If Seagal wanted another confrontation, sooner or later, they would meet. And when that happened, Bruce wanted to know exactly what kind of man was standing across from him. Quick question for everyone watching. What would you do if a group of dangerous fighters came looking for you after you had already defeated their leader? Would you walk away, or would you stay and face them? Comment, "walk away," or "face them." And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. Write your country or city in the comments. If you're enjoying this fictional Bruce Lee story, hit like and subscribe. Let's see how many different places are watching Bruce's story tonight. The next evening, Bruce received a phone call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar. "You have until midnight." Bruce said nothing. The voice continued. "Come to the warehouse." Bruce asked, "Why?" "Because Seagal wants another chance." Bruce closed his eyes. "Tell him he already had one." The voice laughed. "This time there won't be police." The line went dead. Bruce slowly put down the phone. For several seconds he stood motionless. Then he grabbed his jacket. The warehouse stood near the river. Old. Abandoned. Surrounded by empty lots and broken street lights. Bruce arrived just before midnight. He parked several blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. He didn't bring anyone. No friends, no students, no weapons, only himself. As he approached the warehouse, he noticed several cars parked outside. Bruce stopped. He looked at the building, then at the surrounding streets. Something was wrong. There were too many cars, too many people, and no police. Bruce entered. The warehouse was dark. A single overhead light flickered above the concrete floor. Then a voice came from the shadows. "You came." Bruce recognized it. Seagal stepped forward. He was wearing the same dark gray shirt. But this time, he wasn't alone. 5 men stood behind him. Bruce looked at them, then at Seagal. "You brought friends." Seagal smiled. "I learned something yesterday." Bruce waited. "One fighter can be lucky." Bruce said nothing. Seagal continued. "But 6 fighters?" He smiled. "That's different." Bruce looked at the men, then back at Seagal. "No." Seagal frowned. Bruce said, "That's 6 targets." The men behind Seagal exchanged nervous looks. Seagal's face hardened. "You're still arrogant." Bruce shook his head. "I'm not arrogant." He stepped forward. "I'm calm." Seagal raised his hand. The 5 men began moving. Bruce didn't retreat. He watched their feet. their shoulders, their breathing. He wasn't looking at their faces. He was reading their intentions. The first man attacked. Bruce moved aside. The second came from the opposite direction. Bruce ducked. The third tried to grab him. Bruce turned. The man grabbed nothing but air. Bruce pushed him away. Another man rushed forward. Bruce redirected him into one of the others. Two men crashed together. Suddenly the warehouse became chaos. But Bruce remained centered. He never chased, never overextended, never wasted movement. Every motion had a purpose. Seagal watched. His confidence began disappearing. The men were falling back one by one, not because Bruce was overpowering them, because he was making them fight each other. The last man hesitated. Bruce looked at him. "Don't." The man stopped. He slowly lowered his hands. Seagal stared at him. "You can't be serious." Bruce looked toward him. "Your friends are finished." Seagal looked around. 4 men were on the ground. One had already backed away. Only Seagal remained. The warehouse fell silent. Seagal slowly raised his fists. Bruce did the same. This time, neither man spoke. They both knew. The real confrontation had finally arrived. Seagal attacked first. Bruce blocked. Seagal attacked again. Bruce countered. The difference between them was immediately obvious. Seagal fought with power. Bruce fought with timing. Seagal wanted to hurt Bruce. Bruce wanted to understand Seagal. And that difference would decide everything. Seagal landed a heavy strike against Bruce's ribs. Bruce stepped back. For the first time that night, pain crossed his face. Seagal smiled. "You're human, after all." Bruce breathed slowly, then nodded. "Yes." He looked directly at Seagal. "That's why you still have a chance." Seagal charged. Bruce waited, and waited, and waited, until the final possible moment. Then he moved. The warehouse lights flickered. Seagal lost sight of him for half a second. That half second was enough. Bruce appeared beside him. One controlled strike. One movement. Seagal's balance disappeared. He fell to one knee. Bruce stopped. He could have continued. He didn't. Seagal looked up. His breathing was heavy. Bruce stood over him. "Now you understand." Seagal looked confused. "Understand what?" Bruce answered, "I never needed to prove I was a fighter." He stepped back. "You did." Silence filled the warehouse, and somewhere outside, a police siren began approaching. Seagal looked toward the doors. Bruce didn't move. The officer from the previous night stepped inside. He looked at Bruce, then at Seagal, then at the men scattered across the floor. He slowly shook his head. "I told you." Seagal stared at him. "Told me what?" The officer looked at Bruce. "You were never fighting a man you could overpower." He paused. "You were fighting a man who knew exactly how much force he needed." Bruce turned toward the exit. But before leaving, he stopped. He looked back at Seagal. "This ends tonight." Seagal said nothing. Bruce walked away. Behind him, police officers entered the warehouse, and for the first time since their confrontation began, Seagal didn't look angry. He looked humbled. Outside, Bruce disappeared into the darkness, but the officer stood in the doorway, watching him go. His partner walked over. "Why did you let him leave?" The officer smiled. "Because he wasn't the criminal." He looked toward the empty street. He was the reason nobody got killed. And that night, Bruce Lee walked home alone. The city around him was silent. But somewhere behind him, a man who had once laughed at his size had finally learned the lesson Bruce had been trying to teach from the beginning. A fighter doesn't become dangerous because he can destroy someone. A fighter becomes dangerous when he has the ability to destroy someone and chooses not to. Morning after the warehouse confrontation, Bruce returned to the gym before anyone else arrived. The city outside was waking slowly, but inside the training room everything was quiet. Bruce stood in front of the mirror. There was a faint bruise along his ribs from Seagal's strike the night before. He touched it once, then lowered his hand. He wasn't thinking about pain. He was thinking about the moment Seagal had finally stopped fighting. That moment had told Bruce something important. The man wasn't evil. He was proud, and pride could be more dangerous than anger. Bruce began training, slow movements first, then faster. His feet moved across the floor with almost no sound. He wasn't trying to become stronger. He was trying to become more efficient. Every movement had a purpose. Every breath had a rhythm. Then the gym door opened. The same police officer from the previous nights stepped inside. Bruce stopped. "You look tired," Bruce said. The officer smiled. "I've been following your problems." Bruce raised an eyebrow. "That's not my problem." The officer laughed. "Maybe not." He walked closer. "Seagal was released this morning." Bruce nodded. "I expected that." "He asked about you." Bruce looked at him. "What did he say?" The officer hesitated. "He said he wants to see you again." Bruce sighed. "Again? He doesn't want revenge." Bruce looked surprised. "Then what does he want?" The officer smiled. "To learn." Bruce remained silent. That answer was unexpected. That afternoon, Seagal arrived at the gym. He didn't come with his friends. He didn't come with threats. He simply walked through the door. Bruce was training. Seagal stood near the entrance. Bruce noticed him, but continued moving. Finally, Seagal spoke. "I was wrong." Bruce stopped. Seagal looked uncomfortable, saying the words. "I thought strength meant being able to make people afraid." Bruce nodded. "And now?" Seagal looked down at his hands. "Now, I think strength means not needing them to be afraid." Bruce smiled slightly. "That's a better beginning." Seagal stepped closer. "Teach me." Bruce looked at him carefully. "Why?" "Because I don't want to lose control again." Bruce studied his face. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Bruce pointed toward the training floor. "Take your shoes off." Seagal did. Bruce moved to the center. "Attack me!" Seagal hesitated. Bruce nodded. "Don't think." Seagal rushed forward. Bruce stepped aside. Seagal turned. Again. Bruce avoided him. Again. Seagal attacked harder. Bruce continued moving. Finally, Bruce stopped him with a simple hand movement. "You're fighting the person." Seagal frowned. "What should I fight?" "Your own impatience." Seagal stared at him. Bruce stepped backward. Again. Seagal attacked. This time, he slowed down. Bruce nodded. "Better." Again. Slower. More controlled. Bruce finally smiled. "Now, you're learning." Outside the gym, however, another problem was developing. A black car had been parked across the street for nearly an hour. Inside were two men. They had been watching Bruce. One of them held a photograph. It showed Bruce standing outside the gym. The other man looked at it. "That's him." The first man nodded. Seagal failed. "What do we do?" The first man folded the photograph. "We don't challenge him." The second man frowned. "Then what?" "We take away his reason to stay calm." That evening, Bruce finished training with Seagal. Seagal thanked him, then left. Bruce remained inside the gym. He had a strange feeling. Something was wrong. He looked through the front window. The black car was gone, but the street looked different. Too quiet. Bruce locked the door. Then he heard a noise behind him. He turned. Nobody. Another sound. A small metallic object rolled across the floor. Bruce's eyes narrowed. He stepped backward. The gym lights suddenly went out. Complete darkness. Bruce stood motionless. He listened. One person. No. Two. Then 3. Footsteps surrounded him. A voice came from the darkness. "You should have stayed away." Bruce didn't answer. The first attacker rushed forward. Bruce moved. The man hit the floor. Another attacked from behind. Bruce turned and blocked him. A third man charged. Bruce ducked. The men had expected panic. Instead, they found silence. Bruce was calm, almost completely calm. He couldn't see clearly, so he listened. Breathing, footsteps, movement. He waited, then struck only when necessary. One attacker fell. Another stumbled backward. The third froze. Bruce spoke into the darkness. "You don't have to do this." The man answered, "We're not leaving without you." Bruce shook his head. "You already made your mistake." The lights suddenly came back on. The 3 men stood around him. Bruce stood in the center, calm, uninjured. And behind the attackers stood Seagal. Bruce looked surprised. "What are you doing here?" Seagal looked at the men. "I followed them." One attacker turned toward him. "You?" Seagal stepped forward. "I know what you're planning." The man smiled. "You think you've changed?" Seagal didn't answer. He looked at Bruce, then at the men. "I'm not helping you hurt him." The men exchanged glances. Bruce understood immediately. Seagal had finally chosen a side, not because Bruce had defeated him, because Bruce had earned his respect. Quick question for everyone watching. Do you think Seagal made the right choice by standing beside Bruce? Comment, yes, if you think he did. Comment, no, if you think he should have stayed out of it. And tell us where you're watching from. Your country or city. If you're enjoying the story, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us, because the most dangerous moment is still coming. The 3 men slowly moved forward. Seagal stood beside Bruce. For the first time, the 2 men who had fought each other were standing together. Bruce looked at Seagal. "Stay behind me." Seagal smiled. Not this time. The first attacker charged. Bruce moved left. Seagal moved right. The man suddenly found himself trapped between them. Bruce controlled his arm. Seagal blocked his escape. The attacker fell. The second man rushed toward Seagal. Seagal caught the strike. He hesitated, then looked at Bruce. Bruce nodded. Seagal moved. The man went down. The final attacker looked around. He realized the fight was over. He slowly lowered his hands. Police sirens could already be heard outside. The officer entered seconds later. He looked at Bruce, then Seagal, then the 3 men on the floor. He sighed. "I leave you alone for one night?" Bruce smiled. Seagal laughed. For the first time, the tension disappeared. Outside, police took the attackers away. Seagal stood beside Bruce on the sidewalk. "I owe you." Bruce shook his head. "No." Seagal looked confused. Bruce continued. "You don't owe me anything." He pointed toward the police cars. "You owe yourself a better choice next time." Seagal nodded. Bruce turned toward the gym. Then Seagal called after him. "Bruce." Bruce stopped. Seagal smiled. "You're still too small." Bruce turned around. A slight smile appeared on his face. "Maybe." He paused. "But you're still too slow." Seagal laughed. Bruce walked back into the gym, and for the first time, Seagal followed him not as an enemy, but as a student. The man who had once ripped Bruce Lee's shirt and demanded proof that he was a fighter had finally discovered the truth. Bruce never needed to prove anything. His control had already answered the question. The following morning, the gym was quiet. Bruce stood near the window, watching the sunlight slowly spread across the street. Seagal entered. This time, there was no anger in his face, no challenge, no arrogance. He simply stood there. Bruce looked at him. "You're back." Seagal nodded. "I want to finish what I started." Bruce raised an eyebrow. "You already did." Seagal smiled. "No, I started a fight." He looked down at his hands. "But I learned something else." Bruce waited. Seagal continued. "I thought being a fighter meant proving that nobody could beat me." Bruce nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now, I think it means knowing when you don't have to fight." Bruce smiled. "Good." Seagal extended his hand. Bruce shook it. The rivalry that had begun with an insult had ended with respect. Outside, the police officer who had watched everything stood beside his cruiser. His partner asked, "So that's it?" The officer looked through the gym window. "Yes." "After everything?" He smiled. "Sometimes the best ending is when nobody has to be carried away." Inside, Bruce picked up the torn white shirt from the bench. He looked at the ripped fabric for a moment, then folded it carefully. Seagal watched. "You're keeping that?" Bruce nodded. "It reminds me of something." "What?" Bruce smiled. "People judge what they see." He looked at Seagal. "But a fighter is defined by what he does when nobody expects him to stay calm." Seagal nodded. Bruce walked toward the training floor. Seagal followed. The two men began training together. No audience, no cameras, no police. Just two fighters learning from each other. And outside, Los Angeles continued moving, as if nothing had happened. But somewhere in that city, a story remained. A man had laughed at Bruce Lee's size. He had ripped Bruce's shirt in front of police officers. He had challenged him to prove he was a fighter. And when the moment came, Bruce didn't prove his strength by destroying him. He proved it by controlling himself. That was why the cops backed away. That was why Seagal finally respected him. And that was why Bruce Lee never needed to shout, "I'm a fighter." His actions had already said everything. Final question, for everyone watching. Was Bruce Lee's greatest weapon his speed, his technique, or his self-control? Comment, speed, technique, or control below. And tell us where you're watching from. Write your country or city in the comments. If you enjoyed this fictional Bruce Lee story, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves martial arts. Because sometimes the strongest fighter isn't the man who wins the fight. It's the man who knows when the fight is already over.